Is your favorite color pink? Are you a fan of smooth, jazzy tunes? Maybe you're a French detective searching for clues to a missing diamond. If so, and even if you're not, you'll love today's video. That's right, today we're covering the entire story of Pink Panther. Now, before diving in, let's cover our bases. It's very likely everyone has heard of the Pink Panther. I mean, he's an animation icon. But there's an important distinction to make. The Pink Panther, and I mean the original Pink Panther, was a live-action film released in 1963 that followed an inept French detective named Jacques Lousteau as he searched for the Pink Panther diamond, a literal pink diamond. However, the actual Pink Panther, the animated cat we all know and love, was only part of the intro sequence to this movie, which otherwise had little to do with him. However, the screen time that did feature the animated cat was so intriguing that in 1964, a series of shorts dedicated to the literal Pink Panther hit the screens. And boy oh boy was it successful. The very first short released, The Pink Fink, was so popular, it became the very first animated short in history to win an Academy Award upon its release. From here, the series took off, and in 1969, the Pink Panther show premiered for television and theatrical viewing. Multiple spin-offs and repackagings followed suit with shows like The New Pink Panther Show, Pink Panther and Sons, Pink Panther and Pals. You get the idea. The team that was involved in the creation of the Pink Panther had some stars: Holly Pratt, Friz Freleng, David DePatie, just to name a few. Now, you might not recognize those names, but certainly names like Bugs Bunny, Porky Pig, or Tweety Bird does ring a few bells. Freleng was key in developing and creating these icons for the Looney Tunes, and the vast majority of the team for the Pink Panther came from the same studio. So it comes as no surprise that they could take the Panther and turn him into the icon that he is today. As far as the Pink Panther himself, he's a slick, suave, and generally pretty quiet guy. He's also incredibly clever with the use of very absurdist and cartoony logic to overcome whatever obstacle is in his way. I mean, we're talking about classic cartoons after all. Okay, with that little history lesson out of the way, let's jump right into the Panther's debut. Our first short, The Pink Fink, is the first time anyone ever saw the Panther in his very own form of media. In fact, this short was released a few years before the Panther was part of any dedicated television series, and as I mentioned before, it won a freaking Academy Award for animation. Can't downplay how big of a deal that is. Anyway, in this short, a painter is painting a house blue, and one thing about the Panther is that he loves the color pink. He also loves pranks, so you could probably guess where this is going. The Panther sneakily paints the walls with his favorite color. This drives the painter mad because he doesn't know who or what is covering up his work without him seeing. Every time he finishes one part of the house, somehow it's magically turned pink. Eventually, the painter catches on to the Panther's game and chases after him, bringing with him his trusty rifle. You know, I get that most early cartoons frequently have characters resorting to bombs and firearms on a whim, but even with that standard, talk about over-escalation. Anyway, the Panther makes a great escape and sabotages the painter's rifle by filling the barrel with pink paint. He fires off shot after shot that covers the exterior of the house in pink splotches, eventually covering the entire thing. Fed up and out of options, the painter buries the pink barrels. But that too does not work, and in fact grows pink grass, pink flowers, and soon the entire world around him becomes pink. The Panther promptly falls in love with the pink property, gathers his things, and moves into the now perfectly pink home. Overall, solid standalone short, but it wouldn't be long until the Panther got a full TV series to call his own. Our favorite pink cat finally hit television screens back in 1969 with the Pink Panther Show, a collection of shorts that follow a very absurdist and surreal style of comedy. You know, slipping on banana peels, characters running on air, massive bombs that leave characters covered in soot. Stuff like that. These original 2 seasons are the cornerstone of all iterations that come after, and really set the stage for the Panther's cool persona. The stylization of the shorts themselves are very reminiscent of those old cartoons, with simple geometric shapes, monochromatic backgrounds, that classic hand-drawn simplicity that comes with early versions of animation. Alongside this, the main cast of characters generally do not speak. Instead, each episode comes with what seems to be its very own orchestra to emphasize emotions or big moments. And to cap it all off, the Pink Panther was his own swanky, jazzy soundtrack. Alright, kicking off the Pink Panther show is The Pink Blueprint. In this short, the Panther finds himself on a construction site with the painter? Yeah, that is in fact the painter from the previous short. We've already got continuity. How cool. Not only that, but he's actually got a name now, Big Nose, and he's essentially the primary antagonist throughout the Pink Panther franchise. He undertakes many roles, be it painter, janitor, or in this case, contractor. And similarly to the Pink Fink, the contractor is trying to follow a blueprint, but the Panther has other ideas. Pink ideas. The Panther wanders around the build site and makes adjustments to the construction, and of course the contractor is initially confused about the changes. After a few wild antics, including an ever-classic wrecking ball gag, The contractor catches wind of the Panther's pranks and locks him in a closet. The Panther swaps the blueprint with his pink print that he painted blue, and the contractor seemingly builds the Panther's construction. However, in the end, it was all just a ruse, and the contractor built what he was supposed to after all. Hey, that Panther's good, but he can't win them all. The next short, Rocka by Pinky, introduces a new reoccurring character, a dog, known simply as, the dog. He's the companion to Big Nose, and is very often seen at his side. This time around, the dog and Big Nose are out on a camping trip, and of course, who's there to wreak a little bit of havoc? The Pink Panther. However, this time, the Panther had no intentions of pranking Big Nose. You see, the monochromatic man with the massive schnoz is a loud sleeper, and his snoring is bothering the Panther. So he finds various ways to rid himself of the racket, even sending the guy off of a waterfall. However, each time the Panther interrupts Big Nose's sleep, he mistakenly believes it to be his dog that's wreaking havoc, and finds various ways to keep the menace at bay. In the end, the dog and Big Nose get into a big fight that snaps the Panther's branch from its tree. The two realize who it really was that was antagonizing them, and they team up to chase him out of the forest. I'm glad the dog got some form of justice in the end, but I just hope that they can all make up in the end. And finally, I'll get some solid shut-eye. For the very next short, Hink Pink, the Panther is on the run from a big game hunter named Tex. And when I say on the run, I mean the Panther is outsmarting the southern hunter at every turn. Tex takes a creative spin on the classic story of Noah's Ark to capture 2 of every animal for his lady back home. 2 of every animal except for the ever-elusive pink-colored panther.
Brown panthers, check. Pink panthers, yay. Pink panthers? How come I didn't get a pink panther?
The Panther evades capture throughout the entire hunt and sends Tex plummeting down a ravine, not once, not twice, but 3 times by taking over the hunter's own ark. The Panther rallies his animal allies against the hunter and tricks Tex into thinking that a massive flood is on the way. And as icing on the cake, the suave Pink Panther finally speaks.
Why can't man be more like animals?
Charming guy. Alright, the next short, Bully for Pink, shows the Panther's desire for adventure and excitement, and how it can occasionally leave him in sticky situations. While standing outside of the local arena, the Panther discovers an amateur bullfighting competition. The only requirement for entry? A red cape. That sounds safe, but the Panther is enthralled by the ideas of being a celebrated toreador, and so, quote-unquote, borrows the cape of a magician. It seems, however, that this cape possesses some capabilities that the Panther wasn't expecting. Being the garment of a mystical magician, it has the ability to make something, including entire bulls, disappear and reappear before your very eyes. Oh, and it can turn things into flowers. And you better believe it can make a rabbit appear out of thin air. Man, I gotta get myself one of those capes. These antics wow and amaze the crowd, but anger the bull beyond belief. Anger quickly turns to embarrassment, however, when the cape cuts the bull in half. Not really, but, well, literally. The bull's front portion hides in embarrassment, while his rear half runs around the arena. The Panther manages to reassemble the bull, and all is forgiven. The Panther, however, will likely not be setting foot in a bullfighting ring again. Honestly, I wouldn't have been brave enough to step foot in there in the first place. Our next short, Pink Valiant, sees the Panther in yet another adventure with more mishaps than anticipated. This time around, it's a Pink Panther spin on the classic captured princess story. The Panther quickly volunteers to save the damsel, and obviously, any good knight needs a steed for speed. This mighty warhorse, or donkey, rather, is much more of a problem than the Panther could have imagined. After a few attempts to rein him in, the Panther just gives up and takes him to a local horse dealer and trades him in for a different model. You know, like a car. As far as the damsel in distress goes, she turns out to be a lot more than the Black Knight bargained for. The princess defends herself using weapons in the castle and even blasts him with a cannon. By the end, it's the Black Knight who needs saving from the princess. The short, Pink Nick, closes off the very first season of the Pink Panther show. In this short, the Panther is trapped in a log cabin in the woods by snow. It's a cozy atmosphere, but there's one problem. He doesn't have any food. As a matter of fact, he is the food. A pesky little mouse living in the walls is also trapped without anything to eat. However, for this rat, the Panther looks like an absolute feast. This isn't a simple game of cat and mouse either. The rat in question is cunning and absolutely ruthless. The Panther escapes by the skin of his teeth and is nearly cooked alive on a few occasions. It's kind of like a reverse Tom and Jerry situation. The two seem to fight it out for a few months for winter to end, and with the snow finally gone, the Panther is able to make his escape. As it turns out, this cabin belongs to Big Nose. It's been blown up by the rat. Man, this guy just can't catch a break. The short G.I. Pink kicks off season 2 with a bang. Literally. The Panther's imaginative and adventurous nature leads him to join the armed forces. He isn't seeing any combat or anything though. Instead, he goes through boot camp, and who is his commanding officer? None other than Big Nose, of course. The Panther's antics, as always, drive Big Nose insane, and they drive him off a cliff as well. The Panther's just trying to do his part and help out the soldiers, but it always somehow ends in disaster. Gotta admit, using a grenade as a baseball, that's not the Panther's greatest idea. Each time, though, the Panther's actions lead to Big Nose being reprimanded by his superior. After some time, Sergeant Big Nose has had enough and literally ships off the Panther to the U.S. Navy, but almost immediately, the Navy sends him back. Having served in 2 branches, the Pink Panther seems satisfied with his time as a soldier and marches off into the night. In the short Little Bo Pink, the Panther is trying his hand at ranching in Texas. His neighbor seems none too happy to have a sheep grazing on his land. Initially, the rancher maintains an upper hand against the Panther. But it's not long before our pink prankster is able to show the rancher just how clever he is. As it turns out, the Panther is rather proficient at knitting, and with his yarn, he's able to stop the rancher in his tracks by knitting him up into a tree. Desperate times call for desperate measures, and the rancher launches a massive boulder down a hill. But the Panther retaliates by slingshotting it back with the tree. Just like anyone that comes to blows against the Panther, the rancher is at his wit's end and calls on some local gunslingers for help. In his message, he describes the Panther very simply as being pink. I mean, it's a pretty apt description, to be fair. However, when the rancher finds himself covered in pink paint, he instead becomes the target. Maybe he should have added Panther to the description. By the end, the rancher simply gives up, and the Panther reigns victorious over his new pink pasture. In Pink Finger, the Panther tries his hand at being a spy, or rather, counter-spy, accompanying the Panther on his mission and, well, being the one that launches him into it in the first place, is an off-screen narrator.
Perfect. Oh, there's no doubt about it. You were meant to be a special agent.
He's a lovely, if not a little sarcastic Englishman, and a new reoccurring character as well. Throughout the series, the Panther will be charged with some sort of task or influenced by this disembodied narrator. More often than not, however, the narrator gets the Panther into more trouble than he'd probably like. In this short, he convinces him to unravel a spy ring in town, and weirdly enough, he wasn't lying. There really is a group of spies lurking about, and according to the narrator, if the Panther can stop him, he'll be lauded as a hero. These spies, however, are not like the typical people that the Panther goes up against in the show. They're actually surprisingly cunning, and in fact are able to foil the Panther at just about every turn. When the Panther tries to spy by walking along the edges of a building, they throw a banana peel, causing the Panther to slip and fall. Oh, that's so classic. They shoot out the balloon the Panther uses to float to their base, and they even lure him into a trap. Although that last one goes a little bit less according to plan. The Panther does eventually catch one of the spies by blowing the both of them up. But by the end, the Panther has had enough. Perhaps being a secret agent simply isn't all it cracked up to be. Who knew? In this next short, Hink Slink, it's a freezing winter's day, and the Panther needs somewhere warm to stay. Along the street, he discovers a quite lofty home with a glorious fireplace inside. Whose home is this, you ask? Oh, it's good old Big Nose's, of course. In this short, Big Nose is a big game hunter, and his home is riddled with taxidermy trophies of his past exploits. Reasonably, this has the Panther terrified and looking for a place to hide to avoid the same fate. Big Nose is none the wiser to the Pink Panther, taking the spot of a regular taxidermied panther. However, his trusty companion, the dog, notices something off nearly immediately. Though, despite his canine's warnings, Big Nose brushes off all the concerns. While squatting in Big Nose's home, the Panther takes in all the amenities, including the man's dinner and his bath. These antics go by without Big Nose noticing that it's the Panther, and instead he blames the dog, who ends up out on the snow-covered street. Loyal as ever though, the dog still tries to stop the Panther, even from outside, but the Panther's too slick to be caught, and evades detection each time. By the end, the Pink Panther lies comfortably in Big Nose's own bed, while the man chases off the dog he believes to be the real menace. The short titled We Give Pink Stamps caps off Season 2, and the Pink Panther show as a whole. In this short, the Panther finds himself in a department store after closing with janitor Big Nose. The Panther wanders around the store trying out different items, poking and prodding, and Big Nose, typical shenanigans. He fluffs himself up in a state-of-the-art dryer, defluffs himself himself with a clothes iron and even races about the store in a kitty car. One that can go up to 150 miles per hour, it seems. That looks pretty fun. All the while, Big Nose has no idea what's going on around him. I mean, that's gotta be pretty scary, alone in a massive department store with a bunch of different products all going haywire. He must think it's a ghost or something. After a bit, Big Nose has had enough and leaves a quitting notice on his boss's desk. With full reign of the store, Panther continues to wander around and finds just the perfect perfume, Pink Passion. He finds it to be irresistible. Turns out, it really is. After putting it on, a lion rug that is on sale comes back to life, completely enamored by the aroma of the Pink Panther. The Panther squashes the advances of the rug and returns to the store. At this moment, another janitor walks in and the Panther hides, ready to begin his antics all over again. Now, these original shorts followed kind of an interesting format. Each broadcast, of course, contained 2 episodes of the Pink Panther show, but sandwiched between them was an episode of The Inspector. This show followed a goofy yet effective French detective. He's unnamed, but I think it's safe to assume that this is Jacques Lousteau from the original Pink Panther films in cartoon format. The Inspector and the Pink Panther show don't actually cross over until way later on, but it's worth mentioning here. Okay, the first episode, Bomb Voyage, was the first broadcasted episode of The Inspector, and it was sandwiched in between the Pink Blueprint and the Pink Tail Fly. In this episode, the commissioner of the Inspector's department has been kidnapped by aliens, so it's up to the Inspector and Sergeant Doo to rescue him. The pair are able to track down the commissioner on the aliens' home planet, and for their crimes, the Inspector deems the entire planet under arrest. Of course, the aliens are just gonna go quietly, so the Inspector, Doo, and the commissioner make a run for it. Unfortunately, the ship that arrived for their escape gets boarded by one of the aliens instead, meaning that our heroes are trapped on an alien planet. All according to plan, though. Hey, Inspector?
According to my calculations, it will end again in about 5 years.
What?
The Pink Panther show went off the air in 1971 and made way for something different, something exciting, something entirely new. The new Pink Panther show. Okay, so really, there wasn't anything that different between this version of the show and the previous, save for a new title sequence that ran before each episode.
P-N-T-H-E-R, the new Pink Panther show!
Matter of fact, the vast majority of episodes that aired during this iteration of the Panther were simply reruns of the original shorts. However, new ones were in fact made for this series specifically. Their aesthetic is mostly the same as the original series, but is altered just slightly enough to where it's pretty interesting to look for the differences. So let's waste no more time and dive right into them. For the first of the new shorts, A Fly in the Pink, the Panther owns his very own apple orchard. Sounds like a pretty nice setup, only there's one issue. A fly is on the loose. But not just any fly, a genetically modified fly that loves apples. How inconveniently specific. Naturally, this fly has found its way to the Panther's orchard and is decimating the Panther's apple trees. The Panther does just about everything he can to get rid of the pest, but even a normal fly is hard to catch. This one is abnormally strong and incredibly clever, giving even the Panther a run for his money. However, the Panther is finally able to claim victory over the flying pest by squashing it inside of a book with a picture of an apple. Panther seals the fruit fly in an envelope to send back to the Agricultural Experimental Center so that he can finally relax on his orchard in peace. In the next short, Pink Troubadour, Big Nose gets kicked out of his home for playing his tuba too loudly. And as a quick side note, the colors and the details in the houses and buildings in this town are perhaps the best example of the evolution from the original shorts. Everything in this short seems a little brighter and more detailed. Again, it's nothing that makes this short a modern marvel of animation, but just something to note about how the show is growing just a bit as it ages. Anyway, Big Nose and the dog, who seem to have had a complete makeover for this short, decide to head into the forest beneath some mountains. Here, Big Nose can practice his tuba in peace, so he thinks. Unbeknownst to him, he's placed himself directly underneath the tree that the Pink Panther lives in. We all know how much the Panther loves his beauty sleep, so it comes as no surprise that Big Nose's big noises irritate the Panther. The Panther does everything he can to get some shut-eye, dropping some bubblegum that the tuba blows into a massive bubble, causing Big Nose to crash into a cliff above him, using a magnet to pull the tuba away and crash it on top of him, even filling the tuba with cement. This causes the tuba to blow out fully formed bricks that build a house around Big Nose, naturally. Of course, this whole time, Big Nose is oblivious to the Panther and blames all these mishaps on his poor dog. By the end, Big Nose realizes it's the Panther. but finds himself caught in a pickle. Well, caught in a bubble, I should say. When the panther fills the tuba with water and soap, Big Nose finds himself floating up and crashing down. Then floating up and crashing down, caught between the panther pranking him and the dog trying to save him. That's a pretty good way to summarize Big Nose as a whole, I'd say. This next short, Pink, sees the Pink Panther chasing down a tire after his car breaks down. The only issue is that this tire is on the move and is practically running away from the panther. When this tire treads along power lines, rolls into a theater, which forces the panther to wait in line and buy a ticket, only for the tire to immediately leave afterwards. Then it also rides into an elevator to the top of the hotel, only to fall and land directly on a flagpole. Whew, this tire's sentient. It's gotta be pranking the panther or something. The panther manages to free the tire from the flagpole, and it rolls to a nearby zoo, where the panther has to overpower a gorilla, and then rolls into a tire shop, forcing the panther to pay for the tire he already owns. But it doesn't stop there. After chasing the tire all across the city, and then paying for it, the panther returns to his car, only to find it's been towed away. Jeez. I guess this is karma for always pranking Big Nose in the past. Speaking of pranks, the next of the new shorts is called Pink Pranks. Although I must admit, it has little to do with pranks and is really about Pink Panther surviving the frozen tundra. The short opens with the panther on a plane, believing he's en route to the city of Rome. As it turns out, though, he booked a flight to somewhere called Nome in the middle of Antarctica. Simple mistake to make. While stranded on the ice, the panther accidentally angers a polar bear that is hot on his tail. Or maybe cold on his tail? We are in the tundra. As the panther runs off, he meets a friendly little seal who propels him on an ice cap away from the angry bear. While making his way to Rome on foot, the panther comes across a hunter, looking for a seal to make a fancy new coat. The hunter chases after the little seal, and not wanting to let his friend be turned into a coat, the panther chases after the hunter with the seal's help, and the two of them trap the hunter in icicle jail. Once again, the panther is back on the trail to Rome. But once again, as well, the polar bear is back for the panther. The seal comes in once again to save his new friend from the bear. But then the hunter reemerges, and soon enough, all four are embroiled in a high-stakes chase. The polar bear and the hunter find themselves lodged in the side of a snowy cliff. When the hunter makes fun of the bear, his attention shifts away from the panther and to the hunter. Now both the panther and the seal are free to go, and together they kayak off towards Rome. Also, fun fact, that Nome place is actually a real city in Arctic Alaska. Kinda cool. Okay, just like the previous iteration, the new Pink Panther show broadcasted with a format that had a very different cartoon sandwiched between the Pink Panther short. This time around, it wasn't the inspector. Instead, it was a show called The Ant in the Aardvark. The premise of the show is very simple. A quick-witted aardvark, or anteater, wants to capture an ant for a snack. However, more often than not, the ant proves to be too clever to be caught. Just like the inspector, the ant and the aardvark don't actually cross over with the Pink Panther until a ways down the line. But again, it's worth mentioning here, just to see where those characters came from. This short, titled Technology Phooey, was the first broadcasted episode of The Ant and the Aardvark. It was sandwiched in between In the Pink of Night and Super Pink. In this episode, the aardvark has grown tired of failing to catch an ant, so he ups his game a little bit by building himself a talking computer to help him out. The computer is sort of helpful, giving the aardvark locations and strategies, but no matter what he does, the aardvark fails miserably every time. Sometimes it's because the ant is just too clever, like when he makes him suck up fire, or simply because the aardvark is a bit goofy, like when he sprays himself with bug spray. Sometimes though, it's simply cartoon logic that gets the better of the aardvark, like when he drops a rock only for it to float back up. The aardvark's quest for the ant is never ending, but I'm sure he'll get him at some point, right? Spoiler alert, he does not. With the new Pink Panther show coming to a close, it was time for the Panther to find a new home. In 1974, he did just that with the broadcasting of a new program called Pink Panther and Friends. Similarly to the previous iteration, Pink Panther and Friends made use of many of the original shorts. However, this time around, each episode of the show also featured a brand new original short for this broadcast. And again, stylistically, there isn't a whole lot that's changed between this iteration and the previous two. Although, as you watch, you may notice that the backgrounds are a little bit more complex and detailed. Again, it's nothing crazy, but when placed side by side with a short like the Pink Fink, you can really see the difference. Alright, in this first episode of Pink Panther and Friends, Salmon Pink, the Panther has done exactly as the title implies. Made a new friend. The Panther's new buddy is a little fish he fed some bread to at the beach. The fish was so thankful, he hopped out of the water to accompany the Panther wherever he goes as his new pet. This short is dedicated to some of the adventures that the two best pals go on. Firstly, the Panther takes the salmon on a walk. Yep, he ties a leash around a fishbowl and takes the fish on a walk walk to the movie theater. Here, the panther dons a top hat to sneak his buddy in to see his favorite movie, Moby Dick. The fish, of course, needs water to breathe and jumps into the drink of someone sitting nearby. As you may assume, the whole charade doesn't last very long. The two then go enjoy a hot dog before arriving at the local aquarium. However, leaving an aquarium with a fish is strictly prohibited, especially if they didn't know you brought it in yourself. So the panther's friend gets stuck inside the exhibit. But just like with the movies, the panther puts on a clever disguise and breaks his friend out by cutting a hole in the aquarium glass. Don't worry though, no water spills out somehow. The two make their great escape, and the panther takes his salmon companion back to the sea. But in an odd turn of events, the salmon actually chokes on the seawater. So the panther and the fish go on another walk without the fish bowl, and the fish barks at a cat and chases it into the end of the episode. Alright, don't ask questions. For the short titled Pink Streaker, the panther and Big Nose are out in the mountains skiing. Something you'll immediately notice is that Big Nose has a splash of color. In this episode and a few others, Big Nose isn't strictly monochromatically white. It's nothing that ever sticks around, but just an interesting little tidbit about how his character design might change from time to time. Naturally, with these two within earshot of one another, something is sure to go wrong. And that it does. You see, Big Nose is a beginner skier and is simply trying to learn the ropes. But when the panther's around, he gets knocked around quite a bit and flies down the mountain. He almost has it as he soars through a forest, but is eventually stopped short thanks to a lonely tree stump. Once again, Big Nose rushes down the mountain, this time chasing the panther for ruining his sweater. And once again, things come to a crashing halt as he slides off a cliff and lands in front of another skier. He's a bit embarrassed, not because of the fall, but because of his lack of clothing. And again, the panther causes poor old Big Nose some strife when his donut falls from his hand and races down the hill, building up into a massive snowball. This ball lands on Big Nose and carries him down to the frozen lake. The panther opens up the snowball, which lets Big Nose out, but unfortunately, the guy falls into the freezing water. I've said it once, I'll say it again. This guy cannot catch a break. Not to worry though, the panther is to the rescue and takes Big Nose to the lodge to de-thaw, or rather, melt and reform. Big Nose has had enough and is looking for revenge against the panther, but instead the two of them end up on one set of skis and barrel down the mountain at breakneck speed. They jump a ramp and end up crossing the finish line for a skiing competition, winning first prize. Hey, I mean, going from beginner to winner in a matter of minutes? I'd call that a rare victory for Big Nose. In this next short, Pink Plasma, the panther makes his way to an old haunted medieval castle, thinking that it's a hotel. Residing in this castle is a horrifically vicious and bloodthirsty vampire. Not really, it's actually just goofy old Big Nose, and he's not too happy about the panther taking up one of his beds. He uses his powerful vampire abilities, his ability to turn into a bat, to try and scare off the panther from his property. But on each occasion, he finds himself falling from the tallest tower into the moat beneath. Easy pickings for the shark that lurks there. The panther uses a vampire's greatest weakness against Big Nose, the sun. By putting up a picture of a sunrise, Big Nose is scared away from his quarters and back to his coffin, where he finds the shark once again waiting for him. Eventually, the sun really does come up, and the panther watches Big Nose be chased away from his castle by his own shark. However, a pair of disembodied boots kicks the panther and morphs into a big, fluffy orange creature that chases him out of the castle. Again, don't ask questions. This next short, Trail of the Lonesome Pink, sees the panther rise as the defender of all woodland creatures. Jacques and Jules, two fur trappers, have made their way to the woods that Panther is currently calling home. They set up bear trap after bear trap to collect as many different types of fur as they can. One of these traps snags the panther's tail, and at that moment, he decides that he'll be the hero the animals need and drive the trappers out of the forest. He kicks off his attacks by sneaking some snapping turtles into the beds of Jacques and Jules. The two are initially very confused and even blame each other, but something's fishy. They go outside and summon their trusty bloodhound to follow some pink tracks. They do, in fact, find the path that the panther is on, but not the panther himself. Instead, they find traps that bite at them. More snapping turtles? Oh my god. The trappers eventually find Panther up in a tree and climb to the top to get him. Instead, though, they find a rope tied around the branches. The panther knocks over a boulder tied to the other side, and the treetop slinks down. The trappers are sent flying all the way out of the forest, and the panther is lauded as the hero and the king of the woods for saving the animals from the devious Jacques and Jules. In the same vein as Hero of the Woods, this next short, Keep Our Forest Pink, sees the panther operating as a park ranger. The panther seems to take his job very seriously, wandering the woods, picking up trash, and monitoring the animals. So you can imagine when Big Nose shows up for a camping trip that the panther will be paying close attention. And rightfully so. This guy seems to have no respect for the forest. Immediately upon arriving, he chops down a sign for no open fires, and then starts to build an open fire. Usually, Big Nose is a poor victim of the Panther's pranks, but this time around, he really is the antagonist. The Panther, of course, puts out the fire and prevents him from building a new one. But even still, Big Nose refuses to follow the clearly written rules. He rows out to the middle of the lake that prohibits fishing, and what does he do? He fishes, and he's just throwing empty cans in the water and stuff. I don't know what's gotten into Big Nose today, but he's being a huge jerk. The Panther takes the fishing reel and attaches it to a sunken safe, sinking Big Nose's little boat, and he returns to the shore. The Panther is then appalled at what he sees before him. Big Nose's campsite is covered in garbage, so he calls for a red alert. A woodpecker pecks the signal out and awakens the sleeping bear, who goes on to force Big Nose into cleaning up well into the night. And just as he's about to get some shut-eye, the park closes, and the Panther flicks some switches, causing the forest to disappear. Okay, the ridiculousness of the show is starting to grow on me a little bit. In our next short, Pink Elephant, the Panther finds himself an elephant, but it's actually not pink, just a standard elephant color. After visiting the zoo one day, the Panther finds that the elephant he was feeding wanted to come with him. He tries to usher it back inside, but to no avail, so he must try and sneak him into his home. Yeah, sneak an elephant into a high-rise apartment. That'll be easy. Already, the Panther has troubles getting the big guy through the front door. And so he has to use the basement entrance. Even that proves difficult, but thankfully, it ultimately works. Of course, the noise wakes up the building manager, Big Nose, who leaves his office to investigate, and nearly catches the Panther in the act. However, the two are able to avoid detection by hiding the elephant under a table. Right. The next challenge is getting into the Panther's room, and with the elephant's loud, clobbering steps up the stairs, surely there's no way they can get away with it. However, they make it upstairs, shower up, and lay down for bed. The manager arrives in the room to see the two sleeping, and he thinks nothing of it. When the elephant falls through the floor and onto the manager's lap, though, well, I think it's fair to say that at that point, the Panther is in a world of trouble. Closing out Pink Panther and Friends is the short Mystic Pink. In this episode, the Panther finds himself a magical hat on his way into town. And oh man, does this hat have some serious power. Outside of being exceedingly stylish, of course, the hat houses many a woodland creature, birds, a small bunny, and most notably, a human-sized rabbit that knows the ins and outs of how to use the magic of the hat. The Panther is still a little unsure of the hoppy guy at first, but takes him into town with him. The magical hat and rabbit proves an invaluable find nearly immediately. With the wave of a hand, or a paw, the rabbit pulls a 5-star meal from the hat. Following this, the Panther realizes the potential for opportunity that this hat can provide, and uses it to try and make some money in the oil field. This doesn't go according to plan, as he just kinda ends up covered in oil. No worries though. The hat manifests a club membership card for the Panther to get a nice wash at a steam bath. The Panther continues on with his day with his newfound magical powers at the ready. But the rabbit becomes sidetracked by a beautiful lady bunny. This, however, angers another human-sized bunny living in the hat, his wife. Uh-oh. The male rabbit runs off, summoning the van that the hat originally fell from and rides off into the horizon, forever leaving the side of the Panther. Hey, it was fun while it lasted. With that last short, we officially exited what is known as the classic era of the Pink Panther. From here on, we're on new grounds as the Panther and all his friends, or enemies, evolve. The first stop on this road is the show Pink Panther and Sons. Now, this show has a notable absence. The Pink Panther. I know, but stick with me. He is in the show, but the premise revolves around the Pink Panther's kids, Pinky and Panky, so the Panther himself only makes short appearances. But Mr. YouTube Man, why include a season of a show that doesn't include the Pink Panther in a video about the Pink Panther? It's a pretty good impression, that's what you guys sound like. Well, because this series shows how the Pink Panther is evolving from its classic roots. And with this series, a good bit of stuff evolved because the studio that made it was evolving. Hanna-Barbera, yes, that Hanna-Barbera, Hello Flintstones, Tom and Jerry, and Scooby-Doo just got some major technological upgrades as the series was in production. And you'll definitely see it as we go through some of these episodes. So, heck, even outside of the behind-the-scenes changes, and in regards to the show itself, the vast majority of the characters speak now. There was a slight remix to the classic Pink Panther theme, episode runtimes increased from 6-minute shorts to 10-minute segments. Let's see, what else? And there's a whole host of new main characters who we'll be getting to right now. Episode 1, Spinning Wheels, serves as the perfect starting point for Pink Panther and Sons, as we get a solid first look at the main cast. Firstly, there's Pinky and Panky, the Panther's boys. Pinky is the older of the two, somewhere in his preteens, and Panky is his infant little brother. Panky can be a little troublemaker, wandering off from his protective older brother and getting into all sorts of mishaps. In this episode, Pinky is heading to the bike shop, and he discovers that the owner is looking for someone to sponsor in the upcoming charity race. This sponsor will get some sweet new wheels wheels and a new team center named after them. Pinky is eager to jump at the opportunity, but so is Finko. Finko's a lion and the leader of a small group known as the Howl Angels. Finko and his buddies serve as the series antagonists, often working against Pinky and his friends. Finko wants that new bike, of course, but is also under the impression he'll be able to get a cut of the profits associated with the team center. Sneaky. To resolve this difference, one of Pinky's friends, Chada, proposes a bike race to determine who will represent the bike shop.
Pinky's a winner.
Ha! You call that English? You're looking at the fastest thing on two wheels to ever hit this town.
Chada is a purple panther with a deep vocabulary, and she's a member of what is known as the Rainbow Panthers, aka Pink Panther's friends. Yeah, this show introduces a whole slew of newly pigmented panthers, and we'll get to each one of them as they come up. The panther lore is really expanding, folks. Finko agrees to do the race, but generates excuse after excuse as to why he can't participate himself, so he sends his right-hand man Howl to race in his stead. Finko and the Howl Angels are a devious bunch, and immediately start cheating as a way to gain an upper hand in the race, starting by sabotaging Pinky's bike. Not to worry though, Annie, one of the Rainbow Panthers, is incredibly inventive and is able to fix the bike in no time. The race continues as normal, with Finko trying to stop Pinky at every chance he gets.
From now on, no more Mr. Nice Guy.
In the end, however, the cheaters get their just desserts by being covered in cement when a plot goes wrong. Pinky wins the race and claims his new bike from the shop. Alright, this next episode, Take a Hike, sees the Rainbow Panthers on a trek into the woods. Man, these kids are adventurous, just like another brightly colored panther I know. Continuing with the introductions, we have Rocko, the yellow panther with the boxing gloves. He's the sports-minded one of the group. Murphle is the green panther, and he's extremely soft-spoken and shy. And lastly, there's Pumpkin, the blue panther. You'd think, he'd be orange, right? Pumpkin, whatever. He's a bit of a goofball and tends to have difficulty with words. While the group wanders the woods, they stay close by grabbing hold of each other's tails. Panky, however, has a bad habit of wandering away and is nearly lost. Pinky's able to reel the little guy in at first, but when Panky lets go a second time, he befriends a baby eagle and finds himself high up in a tree in the eagle's nest. The rest of the Panthers spend the rest of the day searching for Panky and eventually find him in the tree. However, Pumpkin finds himself floating downstream, but he doesn't know how to swim, and to make matters worse, there's a waterfall. Pinky is able to launch a rope to Pumpkin, and he's ultimately saved by the eagle parent, who swoops in and snags him from certain doom. The group decides to head back home, and Pinky makes sure that Panky is undoubtedly secured to his tail this time. In this next episode, Pankys Pet, the Rainbow Panthers, as well as their parents, are on vacation. You know what that means. The Pink Panther himself makes one of his rare appearances, although it's more of a cameo than anything, because this episode revolves around Panky finding himself a pet dinosaur. While exploring the beach, Panky wanders off, as he always does, and finds a huge egg. Soon enough, the egg hatches, and a little reptilian creature emerges. It's a dinosaur. And this thing is hungry. The little guy has a massive appetite and eats just about everything in sight, edible or not. This ruins the Panthers' plans for a little picnic on the beach, so they try to lose the dino, but Panky is adamant about keeping his new friend around. Pinky and pals try to sneak away with Panky, but the dinosaur always finds his way back around.
Oh, don't mention the word egg. That's where all our problems began.
Look! How odd! I didn't know he could swim!
He even makes his way to the luau lunch feast and eats the entire thing himself. Of course, nobody's happy about this, especially not the captain. But when the kids try to explain, he doesn't believe them. I mean, who would believe them? Dinosaurs. In 1984? Come on. The Panthers must now find Panky, who escaped with his little buddy, and they track him to a nearby cave. Inside, they find not only Panky and the baby dino, but the dino's mother too. Now that Panky's pet has a new home, the Panthers return to their parents without having to worry about the ravenous reptile.
Wish I could say pleased to meet you, ma'am, but we were just leaving.
This next episode, The Pink Link, sees the Pink Panther family expanded just a little bit and shows what the Panther has been up to since his time back in the classic era. The Panthers are expecting a cousin to be arriving in town soon, their cousin Punky. For the festivities, they will be taking him to a film festival, but not just any festival, a Pink Panther film festival. In this show, the Pink Panther's old classic era shorts launched him into stardom, and he's lauded as a celebrity. I guess that's where he's been this whole time, out doing celebrity things, I guess. You know, instead of raising his kids. Punky doesn't arrive when they expect. Instead, a caveman like Cave Panther crashes into their door. He happens to be pink, just like the Panther family, so they believe that this missing link is their cousin. And man, oh man, does this guy cause a ruckus. Having been frozen in ice for probably, I don't know, a millennia, he isn't accustomed to modern societal norms and goes completely bananas. Most specifically, the sound of a binging bell sends him into a rampage.
No, not again.
Punky's fury causes so much damage to an arcade and an ice cream truck that poor old Pink Panther has to fork over cash to repair the damages. Even worse, the kids are going to have to try and wrangle him in for a formal dinner setting at the film festival. Things actually go pretty smoothly after all at dinner, and Punky manages to behave himself. That is, until the gourmet chef sets his dish on fire and triggers the fire alarm. The blaring bells, of course, sends Punky into a fit of rage, but it's actually more beneficial than anything. He puts out the fire and shuts off the bell, inadvertently saving the day.
He has saved the day by putting out the fire. Bravo, mon ami. You are the hero.
Wrapping up that last episode also wraps up our coverage of Pink Panther and Sons. Even though the show was taken on by such a prestigious studio and saw some updates for the Pink Panther franchise, it actually proved quite unpopular due to the significant lack of the Panther himself. However, this didn't completely halt the franchise in its tracks. About a decade later, the Panther would return and star in a brand new show simply titled The Pink Panther. This iteration proved rather successful as it ran for 2 seasons over the course of 2 years, and even saw a nomination for a Daytime Emmy. With this new show came a bunch of changes as well. Of course, the animation was brought up to par with the popular 90s era cartoons. The theme song received yet another remix that still maintained the classic Pink Panther prestige, and in the most shocking plot twist of all, the Panther himself speaks. Yep, our once silent protagonist is now fully voiced and is American.
Fink, Pink.
Talk about a total 180. With introductions out of the way, let's jump right in. The Panther's 90s debut begins with the episode Pink, Pink, and Away. In this episode, the Panther fantasizes about being a superhero. In fact, he wishes so much to be super, he goes out and buys himself a superhero costume. But what good is a superhero with no bad guys to take down? Not to worry, the infamous gangster Dogfather, that's a great name, arrives on scene, robs an ATM blind, and steals a woman's car with her child still inside. Sounds like the perfect job for the newly created superhero, Super Pink. Well, maybe it's not. The Panther is considerably unsuper. Still great, but no superpowers. He tries his best to foil the plans of Dogfather, but more often than not, it just sees the Panther getting squashed, ran over, and otherwise defeated. Amazingly though, he's able to track the criminals to a museum housing the Rickshaw Diamond. Here, Dogfather and his goons use the kid they inadvertently kidnapped to steal the massive gem, and leave the child behind. Despite his considerable lack of powers, the Panther is able to trap the criminals in a ribcage fossil, and return the diamond back to where it belongs. Another day, another adventure for the Panther. Alright, the next episode, Down on the Ant Farm, sees the return of 2 characters from way back in the classic era, the Ant and the Aardvark. In this episode, the Panther is conducting some pretty major research on shrinking and growth technology with his friend, the Ant. Through his work, the Panther has discovered a whole new way to grow crops, by shrinking seeds and livestock, and giving them to ants to make literal ant farms. That's cool stuff, actually. Unfortunately, things go haywire with his shrinking ray that sees the ant farm get delivered directly to the Aardvark's house. And well, the thing about Aardvarks is, they love ants. The Panther tries a number of different disguises to get inside the Aardvark's house, but none work. So as a last-ditch effort, the Panther shrinks himself and rallies other ants to storm the castle. Under the Panther's leadership,
Are you with me?
the ants are able to take down their mortal foe, and the Panther gets back his prized ant farm. By the end, the Panther's research garners him a gold medal. Pretty cool to see those guys return. This next episode, Pinky in Paradise, introduces a brand new character to the franchise, Voodoo Man. The Panther finds himself short on cash, and really wants a new pair of rollerblades. When he's laughed out of the store, the Panther meets a cranky and hungry old parrot, who tells him about an old buried treasure on a remote desert island. With no other way to get some money very quickly, the Panther is intrigued, and immediately accepts the offer. However, the parrot fails to mention that there's some danger on this island. A man that goes by simply the name Voodoo Man might cause an issue. I mean, it gets straight to the point, I'll give the name that. Now, Voodoo Man is a native to this island, and doesn't want anyone else around him. So with his magical staff, Voodoo Man wards off the Panther and the parrot. Voodoo Man doesn't know anything of buried treasure, but when the Panther mentions it, he finds himself equally as intrigued by the idea of a chest full of bones?
Chill, Masked Man. He's the only one who knows where to find the treasure.
The guy likes bones, what can I say? With a new goal in mind, Voodoo Man takes the parrot and returns to his home. The Panther meets him here, and takes one of his magical staffs. The two fight it out in a magical duel, and the Panther actually comes out on top by shrinking Voodoo Man. And with a handy new toy, the Panther is sure to find the chest in no time. And he does. After hours of searching, he finally uncovers the fabled buried treasure. And inside he finds not bones, not money, but crackers. Yes, the legendary treasure was nothing more than a chest full of crackers. Hey, the parrot loves it, but the Panther and Voodoo Man, not not so much. In this episode titled The Magnificent Pink One, the Panther lands himself a job as the sheriff of a small little town out in the plains. Being sheriff of this town, though, really isn't a glorious job since there's only one horse and it is mean. Notorious bank robbers are on the way, and Big Nose says they need to find someone gullible to take on the job of sheriff. Yeah, Big Nose says this. Just like the Panther, good old Big Nose is back and more talkative than ever. With Panther as the town's new leader, he's tasked with taking down the thieves with his trusty horse. Eagle-eyed viewers might even recognize this monochrome steed from some time way back in the classic era. And true to form, the horse gave the Panther just as much trouble then as he does now. After a bit of time wrangling and taming, the Panther mounts his steed and rides off after the bank robbers. The chase goes on well into the night, and the Panther is able to track the robber to their camp. Instead of outwardly attacking the duo, the Panther instead pits the two brothers against one another and sets a trap. The robbers are lured directly into a jail disguised as a bank, captured once and for all.
Uh-oh. Wrong move, little bro.
For his efforts, the townsfolk offer the Panther their thanks and he rides off towards the horizon. In this next short, Junkyard Pink Blues, the Panther is on the search for a missing dog, Mrs. Chubalingo. Yep, that's her name. She's lost her dearest poodle, Foofy, and is offering a whopping $100,000 reward to whoever can find her and bring her back. Panther is quickly enticed by the case and jumps in to help as soon as he can. However, the dog father and his goons are also itching to make some cash. Knowing these guys, though, they don't plan on playing fair. The Panther begins his investigation and finds himself inside of an old junkyard. The dogfather follows suit, thinking the Panther is hot on the trail of Foofy. These guys plan on letting the Panther do all the hard work and jumping in at the last second to claim the reward for themselves. Inside the junkyard, the Panther actually does stumble upon Foofy, but she's not alone. Another dog lives in the yard as well, a rough-looking guy named Dink, and he's incredibly protective of Foofy.
Reporting live from the city dump, Pink Panther. Now back to you in the studio.
As it turns out, Foofy wants to live in the junkyard with Dink. To each their own, but really? A junkyard? Over a mansion? I don't know about that. Anyway, both the Panther and the dogfather are run off by Dink multiple times. But the Panther has a plan. He returns to Mrs. Chubalingo and learns Foofy's guilty pleasure, popcorn. The Panther gathers a whole bunch of the stuff and takes it with him to the junkyard to lure her into his truck. At the same time, he uses old ribs to lure Dink away from Foofy and into a trap. His plan is a success. But when the Panther realizes that Foofy and Dink have puppies, his mood changes. Dogfather, on the other hand, is not so easily swayed by feelings. Dink and Panther then decide to work together to root the Dogfather, and in a weird turn of events, the mansion is right next door to the junkyard. Mrs. Chubalingo takes in Dink and gets her beloved Foofy back, and the Panther is quite a bit richer for his effort. In this next episode, Who's Smiling Now?, another of the classic era characters makes his debut in the 90s. The Inspector. That's right, everyone's favorite French detective and everyone's favorite pink cat are together again in the 90s. In this episode, the Panther joins the Inspector in a massively important investigation. Someone has stolen and ruined the Mona Lisa. The brightly colored and rather goofy adjustments to the painting lead the Panther to think it must be someone from the circus.
Le Mona Lisa, with her lovely, enigmatic smile.
Perhaps a clown. The Inspector, on the other hand, sees things a little differently. Instead of interviewing the clowns, he interviews the dancing bear and high diver instead. These interviews lead nowhere, but the clowns do prove to be quite the disruption and unsafe drivers, so the Inspector shifts his attention to them, not for the painting, but for reckless driving. With the Panther's help, the Inspector arrests the clown on the basis of bad driving and finally connects the dots that he is also the one that ruined the Mona Lisa. Hey, might not have been a straight shot, but he got there eventually. In this final episode of Season 1, Long John Pinky, the Panther has daydreams of adventures that come true. The Panther's taste for adventure also seems to be his main motivation, and this time around he fantasizes about being a design, swashbuckling sailor that takes down pirates and saves the day. Now, pretty standard stuff for a Panther, but pretty unlikely considering he's currently just working at a tavern. Looks like today is his lucky day. Sort of. The infamous Captain Argyle arrives at the tavern and forcibly recruits the brigands for a daring kidnapping of a princess and her treasure. The Panther is included in the recruitment, but he's left below deck to swap and clean the ship. Not exactly glorious. While below deck, though, he meets with the lovely princess and learns that she's meant to be married.
Really screwed up your plans, huh?
He's going to make me walk the plank at sunset. Please help me.
So the Panther does what he can to convince the captain to let her go. Of course, this is all to no avail. The captain is seeking treasure, and treasure he will receive. The Panther's meddling, in fact, irritates Argyle so much he sentences him to walk the plank. The Panther takes the plunge, but makes his way to the princess's ship that is sailing nearby. He gathers the men aboard and takes them to fight the pirates. The sailors board the pirate ship, and the Panther saves the princess from walking the plank. The day is saved, and the Panther plays out the fantasy he always dreamed of. But what was that treasure? Nothing more than the princess's belongings. Kicking off season 2 is the episode Muff the Magic Dragon. And in this episode, the panther finds himself in a world of trouble when he accidentally turns a princess into a dragon. Yeah, this time around, the panther is a wizard. The king is furious, obviously, and the panther must now track down the dragon princess and return her to normal, or face the king's wrath. On top of this, the king unwittingly sent out warriors to slay the dragon without realizing it was his daughter. The panther certainly has his work cut out for him this time. But hey, knights, dragons, and wizards sounds like an adventure he's going to love nonetheless. Panther manages to capture the dragon really quite easily by summoning a phone booth and telling Muffy, the dragon, that she had a call. However, he still has the mighty warriors to overcome, and these guys are tough, but not the brightest.
Get the dragon! Slay the beast! Kill him!
You'll need a bigger bow.
The panther staves off the Valiant knight, but I guess by setting up a boxing match? Yeah, but the two never actually duke it out. Instead, the panther sends him off to lift a massive boulder as training, which ends up squashing the guy. The panther then calls upon his old bullfighting knowledge to rein in the now escaped Muffy, but is once again interrupted by Sir Charles the Knight. Muffy, however, comes along and once again squashes Sir Charles. The blow knocked him so loopy that he actually fell in love with Muffy in her dragon form. Some days later, there's a wedding ceremony for the two, and right before they ride off for their honeymoon, the panther uses some magic dust to turn Muffy back into a human. Except, well, he doesn't. Instead, he turns literally everybody else into a dragon. And it's from that point forward that dragons go on to rule the land. Not exactly the ending that I expected, but, well, I guess it ends happy. This next episode, Varkula, sees our favorite, or maybe least favorite, Aardvark in a completely new light. He's a vampire. Unfortunately, the panther and the ant have found themselves wrecked in the middle of some spooky woods with nowhere to stay, except for the ominous castle of Varkula. I get it. Varkula hides his vampiric nature and insists that his castle's actually a hotel. He ushers the ant and panther to their room, but the ant catches on to Varkula's game. Varkula does everything he can to get his hands, or fangs, on the ant. As per usual between these two rivals, Ant and Panther aren't exactly on good terms following the car wreck, and any attempt that Ant makes to warn Panther just gets disregarded. After a while, the panther is actually the one to get bit, and begins to panic at the idea of him turning into one of the creatures. To lift the curse, Ant and Panther try to capture and defeat Varkula, and knock out the guy's teeth. They succeed in their quest, but the teeth bounce over to Ant, meaning that he is now the vampire. Nonetheless, the panther is safe from the curse, and he and Aardvark make a hasty getaway. That is one heck of a turn of events. This next episode, Lifestyles of the Pink and Famous, sees the panther up to some standard antics, and by that I mean outwitting Big Nose at just about every turn. The panther has found his way into a large, and I mean large, sum of money after saving Mr. Stockton Bond's life. Of course, he saved it after inadvertently endangering it, but that's neither here nor there. For his aid, Mr. Bonds offers the panther anything that he wants, and the panther takes his offer and runs with it, getting himself his very own pink mansion and estate. Hey, remember way back in the classic era when the panther tried to get the contractor to build a pink mansion? Looks like the panther won in the end. Now, Mr. Bonds is very thankful and appreciative of the panther, but Big Nose and his brother, on the other hand, they think the panther being allowed into their high and mighty millionaires club is a disgrace, so they decide they're going to try and flush him out. They first attempt this by allowing their brutish brother out of his cage to go and torment the panther, but once again, the panther's kindness and cleverness prevail. Instead of throwing the panther out, the brute becomes his butler and throws his brother out. The brothers continue to try and get rid of the Pink Panther, but each time they end up failing miserably, even getting shot into space. By the end, the brothers end up spending their entire fortune trying to rout the Panther, and for their deeds, the Panther hires them on as car washers for his brand new valet service. This next episode, Driving Mr. Pink, will cap off our coverage of the 90s era Pink Panther. And man, this episode specifically is the most 90s of the series, stylistically. I mean, background characters are designed and move in a way that is very reminiscent of some of the most popular 90s era cartoons. The buildings in the background are warped and colorful, and the main characters themselves move in a more exaggerated fashion than we would have seen in the classic era. Overall, this episode serves as the shining example of 90s era Pink Panther and just how much it has evolved. Now, in terms of the episode itself, the premise is quite simple. The Panther is late for work and needs his taxi to step on it. The man behind the wheel, good old Voodoo Man. The Panther promises him $100 if he can get him to work on time. And so, Voodoo Man does just that and takes the Panther on a wild ride. Along the way, the Panther and Voodoo Man stave off a road rager, Big Nose, and his pet parrot.
Guy's gonna make me late.
Excuse me! I got just 2 minutes to get to work, Roadhog!
After doing so, they find themselves inside the subway tunnel. And of course, the whole time, Panther is freaking out. He wants to be on time, but he also wants to, survive. After some expert driving, Voodoo Man makes it out of the tunnel in one piece. By the end, Panther makes it to work at the DMV on time, happy to finally be out of that car. But lo and behold, Voodoo Man is the first test he has to administer, and he's on board for another wild ride. Alright everybody, we are on our final stop for the Pink Panther. Welcome to the latest iteration of the franchise, Pink Panther and Pals. This series takes the Panther right back to his roots, but gives the Panther a modern makeover. Episodes in Pink Panther and Pals are very reminiscent of the classic era cartoons, and dials back some of the wackiness from the 90s era. Things like goofy sound effects have been mostly replaced by the classical music score, the music that you'll probably remember from the original shorts. Runtime has also been reduced so that each episode is back to the original format of shorts. The Panther is also back to being the silent protagonist he was before, but he's been dialed back a bit in age, and he's now more of a teenager. And to cap it all off, we've got modern animation to boot. So strap in everybody, we're on the final stretch. This very first short, Pink Up the Volume, sets the stage for what's to come for the rest of the series. Almost as though the show is setting its intention, this episode revolves around Big Nose thinking the Panther is too loud, and he wants him to quiet down. Ironic to think about considering the series brings the Panther back to his quiet self. Speaking of Big Nose, some of his major changes have been reversed. He's also no longer a speaking character, and he's back to his monochrome color palette. It's clear to see. This series really is a return to form. Anyway, as far as the episode goes, Big Nose tries everything he can to quiet the Panther down, but nothing can stop him from playing his music. Eventually, Big Nose grows tired of the noise, he decides to just move houses. He takes off to a house in the mountains far, far away from the Panther and his music. However, when he gets there, his buddy, the dog has made his return as well, which is cool, blasts the Panther's song through a speaker. I guess that there's just no escaping the music for Big Nose. In this next episode, Remotely Pink, the Panther accidentally destroys his TV remote and orders a new universal remote to replace it. Now, not every episode will have the Panther antagonizing Big Nose. Sometimes it'll just be some classic Pink Panther shenanigans. And this is one of those episodes. So, as it turns out, this fancy new remote seems to control just about everything but the television. It can turn on the vacuum, control Big Nose's garage, and even make it nighttime. But it just doesn't seem to do the one thing the Panther wants it to. This remote is so powerful, in fact, it completely alters the episode itself, removes the background, the foreground, and even changes the Panther's anatomy completely. Just when the Panther is about to give up, he goes to get himself some water and realizes that for some reason, the sync knob controls the TV now. Well, I guess it all worked out in the end. In this next short, Gold, Silver, Bronze, Pink, it's Olympic season, and the Panther's competing against Big Nose and the horse. That's right, even the stubborn old mule from seasons past has made his way into the modern era of Pink Panther. Only this time around, he isn't bucking anyone off his back. He's simply competing for the gold. The trio participate in a number of different competitions: hurdles, pole vault, and the long jump, just to name a few. Each time around, the horse performs rather well. The Panther exceeds, and Big Nose, well, he tries his best. Eventually, Big Nose gets quite tired of being shown up, so he tries cheating his way to win. He uses a rocket-propelled discus, a submarine for the swimming competition, and for archery, well, he's actually pretty good at archery on his own. In the end, when it came time for the ceremony, Panther won 5 golds. The horse won, and poor old Big Nose, he got some withering flowers. How's the saying go? Cheaters never win. This next short, Pink, 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 sees the Panther accidentally duplicate himself 3 times. Each of these duplicates has a very distinct personality derived from the Panther. There's one that's a little devious. I mean, we all know the Panther loves to wreak a little bit of havoc here and there. There's another one that is just goofy as can be. The Panther does love his pranks. And then there's one that's a little lethargic, that just wants a snack and a nap. Hey, the Panther does need his beauty sleep and his snacks. Outside of being clones of the Panther, there is one other thing that these 3 have in common, and that is messing with poor old Big Nose. Now, Big Nose has a hard enough time with just one Pink Panther, but 4, the guy practically loses his mind. Matter of fact, I think he does. Big Nose literally shatters into pieces when he realizes that he has 4 Panthers antagonizing him at once. The Pink Panther, the original one, heads across the street and wrangles up his clones to help his old pal. But Big Nose is furious, so he clones himself and gives the Panther a run for his money. I can't say I blame him. Those clones ruined his house. For this next episode of Pinker Tomorrow, I ask you to think all the way back to the very first short in this video, Pink Fink, the one that started it all, because the episode is an homage to that original short. In this iteration of the classic short, the Panther finds himself in a drab, colorless future ruled over by a big-brained super dog. However, he learns that he has the ability to bring color back to anything that he touches. The dog needs to put a stop to the Panther and sends out his henchman Big Nose. The two fly all over the city, and Big Nose removes any and all color that he sees. However, in a gag that's directly inspired by Pink Fink, the Panther sabotages the Big Nose's color sucker by pouring paint down the barrel and switching it to shoot color. He fires off shot after shot that covers the exterior of a house in blue splotches, eventually covering the entire thing. By the end, Panther restores color back to the city, but in the process loses his iconic pink hue. Not to worry though, as it turns out, it was all just a bad dream. Alright, it's final episode time. This episode, Real Pink, wraps up Pink Panther and pals in the most classic way possible. Big Nose being annoyed by the Panther. In this short, Panther is excited to watch his favorite silent movies at the local theater, and sneaks in multiple times right under the nose of Big Nose. The Panther's laughter, however, is too loud, and Big Nose comes in and kicks the Panther out multiple times. Persistent as ever though, the Panther sneaks back in again, disguised as the famous silent protagonist Charlie Chaplin. You know, considering the Panther's quiet ways, it makes sense that he would idolize Chaplin. Unfortunately though, Panther just cannot stifle his laughter, and Big Nose is fed up. Big Nose chases the Pink Panther throughout the theater, and the two even mirror exactly what is happening on the screen behind them. Matter of fact, they're so similar to the silent movie, they end up inside of the screen. By the end, there's a monochrome audience cheering for the Panther as he's chased by Big Nose, and the episode closes on the two of them running inside of the silent movie. This episode essentially is an homage to the Pink Panther himself and his legacy. And yeah, in a lot of ways, the original Pink Panther shorts were very similar to the silent films of Charlie Chaplin. Both were silent protagonists. Both were loved by audiences that viewed them. And most importantly, both became cultural icons. And on that note, our coverage of the Pink Panther comes to a close. We covered a bunch of different eras of cartoons in this one, so let me know which one you grew up with or liked the most in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching, and have an awesome day. See ya.